Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fundraising on Your Terms, raising less than $100,000 and planning for more. My name is Brooke Polizzi, and I'm the Director of Marketing at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you'll see in the chat in just a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs fuel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. One of the things that we hear often from the founders in our community is that they are often too busy running their business to step back and grow it. That's the reason why we built Milestone Circles, which is a free 12-week program that helps entrepreneurs focus on one strategic goal with mentorship, accountability, and community. We'll be hosting a info session on October 22nd that we would love for you to join to learn more about the program and ask any question you have. Take a look in the chat and you will find the information about how to apply and also how to attend that class. But keep an eye on that chat because we'll be sharing links and resources throughout this class related to the content to make sure that you are up to date on all of the incredible opportunities at the Nasdaq Center. We're going to launch a few polls to step back and take a moment to gauge how you all are doing today. We use this information to guide programs. Guide the programs we provide for our global community of entrepreneurs. If there is a specific topic or challenge that you'd like for us to create resources for, please feel free to add them to the chat. We can also have a survey at the end where you can share that information in more detail if that's best for you. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes before we get started. Sorry, I was looking to see how that poll is going, and it looks like we have a lot of optimism in the group. That's great, and there's a little bit of anxiousness and survivings, but to be expected. But I love to see that optimism. It's really nice to see. Please let us know where you're coming from or where you're located in the chat. We would love it. We are also, please let us know based on current events, are you reimagining your go-to-market strategy or thinking about your global expansion differently? Please let us know so that we can help create more wonderful resources like the one today to help us all move forward in building our businesses. If you have if you have questions during this conversation, please add them to the Q&A so that we will be able to address them, whether it's by asking them live or sharing them with our hosts so that we are able to get you the answers you need. While you are answering these polls, please, I'd like to take a moment to please recognize the incredible support from our corporate partners. Their work is the reason why we are able to do what we do. And we are just so thankful. Those funders and partners include Nasdaq, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asia Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Narit Foundation, and BPM. We are deeply grateful for their partnership, and we hope you'll join us in sharing that appreciation. So the last poll we have up right now is what's keeping you up at night? Please let us know so that we can create more incredible classes for you all and workbooks and toolkits. If you weren't already aware, we have workbooks and toolkits available for download on our website, and we would love it if you could join us in learning from them. It looks like finance and sales and marketing which are all really tied to fundraising, are the top items here today. So we look forward to digging in there. Without further ado, I would love it if you could join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guests. We have Anna Steffeney, who is the executive director of famtech.org, and Lauren Dye, who is the co-founder and board director of Cocoon, and she's also the entrepreneur in residence at famtech.org. We would love it if you could join us in welcoming them to this incredible session. So, welcome, Anna and Lauren. We appreciate you being here. I'm going to let you take it away. And everyone, just a quick note, we'll be sending after this class a recap to a link to the video and these resources. So please feel free to watch it again once you've seen it here, just to make sure you don't miss anything. Lauren and Anna, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Steffeney, really excited to be here today, joined by our entrepreneur in residence, Lauren Dye. We have a deck that we're going to be sharing, but really want to hear from all of you either in the chat or in the Q&A at the end. We wanted to do this jointly because we think it's important to have multiple perspectives when it comes to fundraising. Both Lauren and I have had our own entrepreneurial journeys, slightly different, and it's helpful to hear different perspectives along this way. So, love for Lauren to take it. We'll do some introductions, but please don't hesitate to put any questions you have through the content along in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Anna. And likewise, so excited to be here. Being a founder is just so many ups and downs on the emotional journey. And for sure, one of the most emotional is fundraising. And so I'm glad we started with those polls because it's good to see where folks are at. I definitely have been in the surviving bucket many times myself, so can resonate with those of you there. All right. So I thought it would be really fun just to start with our personal stories. And as Anna said, each of us has our own story around entrepreneurship and what that was like for us. And so, Anna, I'm excited to share my story, but I would love for you to start with your journey and how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll make this brief as possible, but I'm Anna Steffeney. Today I'm Executive Director of famtech.org. Famtech is an industry association bringing together innovators and partners solving the needs of working families across the care economy. We have over 200 members. We do programming, newsletter, events, in person and virtual, really supporting this sector. And we're huge fans of Nasdaq's Entrepreneurial Center. We've had a few of our founders go through the Milestone Maker Program. Really grateful to be here today to give back and share with you all. My entrepreneurial journey started 10 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that. Starting to feel a little old. It was really based on a personal experience, like so many of our founders in our sector. I had my first son while living abroad in Germany, had my second son in the US. I was able to take a year off in Germany with government paid leave. And in the US, I was sort of told to keep it hidden as long as possible. Long story short, I ended up leaving my role and starting a company called Leave Logic, which helps employees navigate paid family medical leave. This was at the time when states were just starting to offer programs. It was very complicated for employees to understand their options. We ended up, I'm going to talk about our fundraising approach. Um, uh, I bootstrapped initially. I thought we were direct to consumer, and then we pivoted B2B once we understood that the employer was actually where the pain point existed. I promised myself I wouldn't spend any more of my own money until I had customers. And that kind of created a opportunity in the fundraising space. So we were able to get early adopters and then go with a price round approach versus, let's say, a convertible note or a safe. And so I have a perspective on the pros and cons from a founder equity perspective when you do price round versus safe, and we'll talk about some of that. And so we raised a seed round, and then we scaled. And then 18 months later, we were acquired by a Fortune 200 insurance company. And so I have another perspective about the pros and cons of continuing down the fundraising path along to Series A. I think it's very important to always weigh your opportunity costs, early exit versus another round of dilution, and what that means not only for you as the founder, but for the team. So we'll try to share some of that as well.
Thanks for that, Anna.
And
And I'm Lauren. I am co-founder of Cocoon. And I, very similar to Anna, built Cocoon along with my co-founders, really based on our personal experience. So, Cocoon is software for leave management in a very similar space to Anna's company, Leave Logic. And ultimately, our mission really is how do we empower folks during these really, really challenging times in their lives, whether it's having a baby, which was the case for me and my co-founders. That was the experience that we were going through, starting our families at the very early stages. Or in the case of myself, for example, caring for an older family member. So one of the reasons I started Cocoon as well was because I had seen what it was like for my mom to really struggle with taking a caregiver leave in order to care for my grandmother, who at the time had been diagnosed with cancer. And those personal experiences ultimately informed just what we wanted to pour our time and energy into. And I would say initially our vision was fairly broad. Um, our backgrounds, I spent many years previously at Stripe along with one of my co-founders, and our other co-founder spent time at Square. So because of our fintech expertise, initially we were looking at a pretty broad space of how do we help families going through all these challenges of saving for childcare, figuring out, wills, life insurance, 529s, that whole journey financially. And really, what got us focused on leave actually as the problem was in chatting with users. People, we interviewed hundreds of parents who had gone through the experience of having kids and just heard consistently how challenging the experience was going on leave and people going, with half their paycheck, struggling to get paid by insurance, their state funding, for example. So ultimately ended up building software, selling into HR, the employer, who had a similar problem of managing all the compliance related to leave and also helping their people going through that experience. So, and today Cocoon is a Series A company, very much in that very intense growth stage. Um, we raised pre-seed, seed, Series A. Excited for what's next for us. But can definitely speak to that kind of journey on the venture side. And one note I want to make as well is that my co-founders and I decided early on that we wanted to be a venture-backed company. And I think it's really important to talk about that with your co-founders, business partners, decide whether that's something that you actually want to pursue, because there's reasons to pursue building a venture-backed company and reasons that you may not want to build a venture-backed company and build a company that is, you could say, funded out of, a different type of capital structure. And so one reason that we want to build because ultimately our ambition was to reach millions, if not, tens of millions of consumers who were going through these leave experiences and struggling with them as quickly as we can. So it was how do we get a ton of capital in to capture a lot of market share and have really, really massive impact in this space, potentially even on the same scale as like a government policy change, for example. So that was why we chose to go venture backed. And I would say, like, from a personal network perspective, it made a lot of sense given our kind of roots in Silicon Valley and our experiences working for venture backed companies. That being said, though, it's really not for everyone. We can talk more about that in terms of the growth that needs to be achieved, and so forth. And of course, as Anna mentioned, dilution and giving away a lot of your ownership. So these are all things we can talk about and keep in mind.
Awesome. And I think the next slide is a great kind of segue into helping decide first and foremost, are you ready to fundraise or does fundraising make sense? It isn't something that we should be doing if we just need it for money or need a salary. Uh, if that is the number one reason, I would caution against it because the way investors think about opportunity and where to put their money is is very complex, and trying to give you a rubric in this view of how you can think about your readiness. And this is for venture backed. And again, I want to iterate with Lauren that not every company needs to be venture backed. And especially in today's world where the costs of development, if you're building software solutions, is much lower than it has been in the past with AI and more and low code, et cetera. So this rubric is um, provided by Dave Parker, who is a startup mentor. Also, I'll make a plug for his book called Trajectory Startup. I think Dave was very instrumental in my journey. He used to run Startup Weekend and then Startup Next, and really was the most practical advisor I could relate to, in the sense of, oh, great, give me a number, I can score myself, and help demystify sort of these big broad strokes of what it is to fundraise. And so I just want to go through these a little bit. The way you can think about how to score yourself across each category is sort of: one is you're just beginning, four, you're there, you're nailing it. Um, and then I put the link in here, and then they'll send this out at the end. But I'm just going to go through a few of these to get a feel for it. So, team. Let me just read the categories first. So, team, idea, product, market, customer, competition, business model, finance, traction, timing, IP defensibility, and the ask. And we're going to get in more later about the ask. I know we talked, the subtitle of this is kind of less than 100K, but there's some gotchas or pitfalls as you navigate your ask, depending on what you're building, depending on the geography, and more. So all of these categories are how an angel investor, a venture capital investor, will be assessing your company and what you're building. So we start with team, for example. So you would score yourself a 1 if you're a solo founder or part-time. You haven't quit your job fully yet, let's say. Um, Teams are preferred over solo founders. That said, I was a solo founder, and I can speak to that. 2, you have incomplete or unbalanced team. You're not complementary. You may be lacking tech talent if you're building a software solution, or you're using offshore development with no plan to kind of bring it to in-house employee. Or you have a balanced team, that would be a 3, with complementary skill sets, market experience, and you would score yourself a 4 if you're an experienced startup team with industry knowledge. So as you go through these, and you can read more of those kind of reference points on the website, but I think this is very healthy to assess yourself and readiness, and help you prioritize maybe some of those blind spots or opportunities to prepare yourself to fundraise. It's the worst case scenario to go in without understanding how you're going to be assessed. Speak to 50 investors and say, nobody wants to invest in me. It must be me, right? Or it's how I look, or where I come from. That's the easy or natural, I was there as well, way to go about it. And until I got some objective feedback, I think it helps understand, oh, I'm a solo founder, so I really need to maybe hone my message a bit more about how I plan to build out the team, or go to market, etc. So take a moment, assess yourself, not just once, probably every quarter as you continue going, and keep looking at how others are looking at you. Lauren, I would love to hear your thoughts on how you potentially approached kind of these categories.
It's so cool seeing this in a really structured fashion, Anna, because I will say, I think a lot of times when we're fundraising, we don't think of it in these categories, and what is phenomenal versus uh, investor is unlikely to fund you look like, right? And I love how this breaks it down. So maybe one piece I can speak to, especially in the early stage, is to build a little bit more on what you mentioned on the team side, Anna, and give an example from my own experience. So for instance, especially at the earliest stage when you're, let's say, raising a pre-seed, for example, seed round, for example, at least in the venture space, team is almost everything, to be honest. The rest of it certainly matters, but your idea can change, your product can change, your market can change, and investors almost always know that's going to be the case, right? So, like you said, Anna, like initially you thought you were B2C and then you realized you were supposed to be B2B, right? Cocoon went through like a very similar kind of discovery process. And so, um, just focusing on team for a second here, I think in terms of like the why behind it, I want to start with the solo founder versus having co-founders piece. Of course, having co-founders comes with its drawbacks because there are co-founders are expensive from an equity standpoint, right? As we know. And however, the reason is because typically companies are just more likely to survive and thrive when there's a team of co-founders. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the journey of being on a startup, doing a startup, building a startup can involve a lot of strain. And oftentimes having a co-founder can help you kind of sustain that, sustain that strain. So that's one reason. The other piece is the functional balance that Anna, you mentioned as well. So I'll give an example from my personal experience. So we were three co-founders, and one of us was really experienced in product. So had been a product manager at Square and other companies in the fintech space. Um, for me, my background was go to market, so also in fintech, but very strong in the B2B go to market space around sales, partnerships, for example. That was something that I really spiked on. And then our third co-founder, who was our CTO, was just a phenomenal engineer and was one of the earliest employees at Stripe, really amazing engineering leader. And so among the three of us, we had this like amazing trifecta of product engineering and go to market, which is kind of the best you can imagine. And that really led it to being from an investor standpoint, being like, this is what I'm looking for. So we really checked that box. But we had to really design that. So, for example, initially when my co-founder and I, who are product and go-to-market expertise, first kind of became co-founders, we knew that we had a gap around engineering and technical leadership. And so from the very beginning, our goal was to either hire a founding engineer or to find a CTO co-founder. And and so we did a lot of dating among strong engineers in our network, ended up finding Amber, who became our co-founder and CTO. And just a small note on, we talk about co-founder being expensive, right? Like you're going to give a lot of equity for having a co-founder. And for us, the reason that Amber to us was a co-founder was because her ability to not only create the product as an engineer, but also her ability to lead and scale an engineering team and tell the story and vision of the company. Those are the things we were looking for in a co-founder versus someone who was more, let's say, a founding engineer who perhaps would be more on the execution side of things. So just wanted to share that kind of story on the team piece because I think it's really critical at the earliest stage.
And one thing, just to give a little more context on this rubric, uh, the goal here isn't to be a four in every category. It's sort of impossible. Maybe not for some of you, but for most, you'd be lucky if you're looking at, 15, 20. So for example, what Lauren just said, there's a successful path here with a balanced team, and yet there's another successful path with a solo. But that means I had to over-index in other items such as customers. So we went and got paying customers to prove there was a true market need before we raised money. And so that was our way, and I say our because I was able to bring on early employees later, of mitigating maybe scoring a one on team or a two early on. So it's just an easy way for you to understand how investors will look at your opportunity, whether they're angel, potentially friends and family, but angel or venture, later and to understand where you should be filling in either your plan or gaps across this rubric.
I like that filling in the gaps piece, Anna, because a lot of times folks are like, oh gosh, well, I don't have a X,
Mhm.
CTO. So that must mean that I'm, you know, unable to fundraise, for example. But to your point, it's okay, how do I balance it out with being really spiky on some other aspects, such as I've already got, X number of signed contracts, for example.
That's right. So we hope this is helpful for you. If you're excited at some point, please put your score in there. You can share it. I know it's a little difficult to do on the fly, but hope this is useful to you. So, Lauren, does it make sense for us to kind of talk about some more tactical items beyond the basics ahead of fundraising?
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that, especially I think kind of you previewed this a little bit, Anna, in terms of that sort of subtext of okay, raising less than 100K, right? And especially in the venture world, that actually sometimes comes with some red flags for investors, right? So I think talking about fundraising and what are some of these common pitfalls to avoid and how do you overcome them or compensate for them, that would be something that I'd love to dive into.
That's right. And I think we're going to be talking about strategies and potential opportunities. I don't think we're going to go into details around your corporate structure. Are you Delaware C Corp? Are you an LLC? We're not going to go into the ins and outs of setting the terms around a safe. Do you discount? How do you get valuation? I think there's enough of that out there that you can look into. I think it's more valuable if we share sort of real uh, unspoken truths, a little bit about the hidden gotchas along the path. So just wanted to set your expectation. We're not going to go into the maybe constructs of corporate structure and safe notes.
Yeah, do you want to
So
start, Anna,
yeah,
with some thoughts
yeah,
on that front as far as some of these? Mhm.
yeah. So let's just go with one of the first, and it kind of goes back to one of the rubric items around where you are in your go-to-market. So raising without clear use of funds. There is sort of the slide order I hope that you're getting access to that shows have at least these 10 or 12 slides in your pitch deck. One of them is kind of your roadmap go-to-market strategy. In your roadmap go-to-market strategy, make sure you're showing how you're going to be deploying those funds. In addition, make sure in your financial model, you're showing how you're going to reach those milestones with the deployment of those funds. And it's an interesting exercise, right? It's saying, okay, I'm going to raise this 100K, I'm going to deploy it, or I'm going to raise that will get me to the next milestone, which would prop up $1 million seed, let's say, and planning that all out. And then the $1 million seed gets me to the Series A. All of these milestones, funding, deployment of product, are super critical. It gives the investor insight into how you see growth happening in your business. And there's some gotchas in there. Early on, investors are hesitant for all of the funding to go to salary. That's one thing I was surprised slightly by coming from more first time founder, professional world. How am I supposed to do this without access to capital to survive? And that's one of the major issues here in entrepreneurial land. And so we do have a slide later that talks about alternative financing to kind of bridge you to get to some of those initial milestones. So, Lauren, not sure if you want to talk about how you think about use of funds.
Yes, this one is really critical. So I think a lot of times folks don't understand necessarily what the different sort of like fund rounds are for. We hear this alphabet soup of funding. It's like, oh, they just raised their Series F. It's like, okay, what does that even mean, right? And so I think it's helpful to kind of like break it down a little bit and use some examples from our personal experience. So I'll just take Cocoon as an example, my company. So we have raised pre-seed, seed, Series A. And with each round of funding, there was clear goals for what we were going to use the funds for, right? So starting with pre-seed, that was when essentially it was just, there's a team, right? And with a pre-seed, a lot of times what you're looking to do is when you're raising a pre-seed, you want to have that team in place if you don't yet have some of the other pieces that Anna talked about, such as let's say like traction on the go-to-market side, like signed contracts, for example. At a minimum, you want to have a pretty solid kind of co-founding team in place with that balanced kind of structure we talked about. And for us, the goal of the pre-seed was to get to that initial demonstration of market pull. So what I mean by that was with our pre-seed, we wanted to demonstrate, hey, we now have, as a result of getting this pre-seed, two signed contracts with 150K of ARR, right? So for those of you who may not know, ARR means annual recurring revenue, meaning in kind of software world, someone has signed a contract to pay you 150K and it's happening on an annual basis. And so that is a really good way to think about kind of a pre-seed is okay, we're here to prove initial traction, right? And a lot of times the reason that you need that money for a pre-seed maybe because you need to you need to actually get to that initial, let's say, two signed contracts, right? So using my personal experience as an example, we had to, for instance, pay a contract designer to help us with designing Figma mocks in order to do a demo for these potential customers, right? We had to pay lawyers to help us create our first services agreement, for example. Think about things like privacy and which is really important in our space, given you're dealing with people's, social security numbers, for example. We had to do things like get SOC 2 certified, even just to sign a contract with our first customer, who was at the time Carta. And getting SOC 2 certified, for those of you who may not have heard of that, it's a security certification, takes time and money. You have to pay someone to evaluate you, for example. Well, may need to pay a vendor to actually help you with the certification. So all of these things actually require funds, right? Even besides salary. And so those are the things that pre-seed is often used for. So by the time we exited our pre-seed, we had two signed contracts, like 150K of recurring revenue, which was awesome. Mind you, we did not have a product yet. We just had a demo, essentially a Figma mock that was like telling the story of what our product would do for these initial customers. So that was really the first kind of phase. And then phase two was our seed round. So for our seed round, we really thought of it as, okay, we're raising this money in order to build the product, right? Now that we have confirmed traction and demand for the product, we don't want to spend the money before we know people want it, right? I do not, I mean, I'm not a believer of build it and they will come. I'm definitely a believer of pre-sell, make sure they want it, then build it. And so part of the reason we raised the seed was to build, right? Including hiring a team to build, including, for example, founding engineers. Um, and then additionally, to really prove out the motion on the sales side and start to show that we had a repeatable motion there, right? So initially, when you're starting a company, it's going to be founder-led sales, right? You as the founder are going to be doing the sales yourself. And that's exactly what you want because you want to have that really tight feedback loop in terms of what customers want and asking for into the product. And then you want to develop that sales motion, right? So once you start to get a pattern there, right, you've, signed maybe like 6, 8 contracts, then you can start thinking about hiring a team. So that's also the use of funds for a seed round, right? Hiring our first sales reps, customer success reps, support reps, and so forth. So that's kind of how to think about a seed round. And then Series A is when you really kind of, I would say like when you're raising a Series A, there's no like necessarily a hard and fast rule on, hey, like now this is a benchmark for when you can raise a Series A. But I would say somewhere in the range of like you're on track to get to 1 million of ARR is a good sign, right? And in that kind of Series A, you're really raising the money to prove you have repeatable revenue in at least one channel. So what do I mean by at least one channel? What I mean is, let's say that in the world of selling lead management software, there can be many channels. I can sell B2B into mid-market tech companies. I can sell B2B into a Fortune 500. I can sell into a channel like an insurance company, or I can sell into an HRIS network like an ADP or a Workday, for example. So by no means should you have all of those channels unlocked with your Series A, but you do want to prove, right? You're using these funds to hire a team, uh, spend on marketing and sales, right? To prove that you've got at least one channel working. So in our case, really kind of the first channel that we had discovered product market fit with was mid-market tech. So tech companies who were kind of in the couple hundred person range. And that's really kind of how to think about it is with each of these stages, you want to make sure that you're clear on what you're using the funds for. For example, getting to your first two signed contracts, right? And then B, you want to have clear exit criteria for, okay, when am I ready to raise the next round, right? Um, so that you're ready to go to investors and say, okay, yeah, we're doing a Series A, and even better if an investor comes to you and is like, I want to, I want to do your Series A before you even come to them, right?
So, Lauren, I think this is awesome that you kind of painted that whole journey and picture. I just want to pause and maybe weave in some of the questions that we're getting in the Q&A um, that are adjacent to this. So, just to clarify, when you had the pre-seed funding, were you pre-revenue as well before customers?
Yeah, we were pre-product, pre-revenue. The only thing that was in place was team, essentially. I mean, not even because at the time, um, uh, I hadn't even fully left my job at Stripe yet, and my third co-founder was still, she was not, she hadn't come on yet, right? So it was just a
Right.
very, very early team. But I think to your point, Anna, there's probably a balance here in terms of
Yep.
some structures of founding teams may be able to raise pre-revenue and others may not, depending on
Absolutely.
may need additional traction to show, depending on kind of like that scorecard that you mentioned.
And it's so interesting, us being in similar sectors, building similar solutions. There is a function of category creation that I do not recommend, but I did. And it was harder for me to fundraise because there wasn't a category already. And I think like Cocoon was able to point to other companies like LeaveLogic and say, hey, look, we're building a better mousetrap. We are a more balanced team, and you could fundraise against that, which is, I think, exactly how it plays out sometimes. If you're first mover in terms of how early you are, it can be a negative. Um, it's sometimes easier to come in and say, we can do this better. And so what we had to do, I as a solo founder, without this product existing before in the market, had to go get customers before I could fundraise. And so answering some of the questions that we're getting, it's sort of, it can go either way. Just know where you're going, know how you're going there, I think is the most important thing. Realizing either if you're a category creator, a solo founder, you're probably going to need customers before you fundraise, paying customers. If you have a balanced, awesome team, you're building a product that has a category and clear market, then you probably could get funding at the pre-seed level. And so I think that's really interesting in this conversation and dynamic, and a consideration for many. Another question that I see coming through, and hopefully this answers this. If you have an MVP with beta customers and no MRR, would raising a pre-seed be a problem? And is having an MRR a requirement for pre-seed? I think it comes back to the market and the maturity of the market that you're addressing and what are the competition and competitors in that market. So this is helpful. I think we're clearing some of these. There's a interesting one I want to get to because I think it gets to kind of these over diluting too early, ignoring cap table structure, and we'll get, I think, a little more rapid fire in the remaining 20 minutes that we have. Um, was there any financial decision either of you made that you now regret? And I can start with that one, and then Lauren, I'd love to hear your perspective. So when I solo founded, I was initially an LLC. I did not understand the concept of QSBS, which is a qualified small business tax exclusion. I'm not a tax accountant. I can't give you tax advice. But what happens essentially to incentivize early stage investment in the United States, you as an investor or as a founder have this clock. As soon as you form a C Corp and you're under $50 million in valuation, any gain that is happening off that after 5 years does not have any long-term capital gains associated with it. So there's no tax to pay. So we had a liquidity event. Because I started the LLC instead of a C Corp, my clock only ran for 3 years, let's say, versus the 5 years. And so we did not qualify for the QSBS, and my investors did not qualify for the QSBS. So many early stage investors, angels, bank a lot of their return on the QSBS application. And so even though I was able to take a personal tax write-off on my business expenses early on for bootstrapping, it would have been much better if I was a C Corp from day one. So that's one of the financial gotchas. I would make sure and it's hard early stage to think that this is going to be material ever, or this will actually turn into something. And so should I spend time taking my founder equity exclusions, all these small things? It's hard to make the time for that, but I can't emphasize enough. Please do not cheap out on legal counsel. Please get the best M&A and securities legal counsel you can get so that you're not making some of these decisions in a vacuum. So that's one of mine. Lauren, do you have any?
Yeah, oh gosh,
Dilution.
that's a really interesting one. So, definitely plus one to the legal counsel thing, especially if you're building in a space that is highly regulated and extremely sensitive, such as, a space that involves extremely private information like social security numbers, birth dates, pregnancies, and so forth, right? Super critical. I would say if I were to think about like, is there a specific financial decision that I regret? Honestly, other than having tighter spending controls from an early, or sta I would say not controls, but culture from an early standpoint, I wouldn't say there's anything I would necessarily change, but I think sometimes after fundraising, there can be this sort of like just frenzy around, especially go to market, right? Where it's like, okay, it's just all about building the product and sell, sell, sell. And I think that's a great focus, but also I can say like, for example, for me, I wasn't thinking a ton about some of the cultural pieces around, okay, like how are we creating a culture of really kind of like thoughtful spend, right? And and a lot of times what that can lead to is just overspending. um, I don't necessarily mean on the marketing side, let's say, but just in general, right? Whether it's like on food, on travel, on just the culture of the company, that's really important, right? Because ultimately it does take your blood, sweat, and tears to fundraise, right? And so you want to be really thoughtful on how you spend your money. And I think things like sales and marketing and building the product are really critical. But as a founder, we often have to multitask and also work on some of these like pieces that seem trivial, right? Like, does it really matter how much money your employee spends on lunch? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, there's a culture around kind of like spend that you want to create, depending on kind of like your financials and structure and so forth, that kind of like right sizes things so that you can be sustainable over the long term.
I can't emphasize that enough. My former life before founder was in finance, controlling FP&A, and I brought that with me day one. We were sleeping in Motel Sixes, trying to fundraise, and if stretching that dollar goes a long way. And so, thanks for emphasizing that. I know we talked about we weren't going to get into structures, but this one is kind of a experience one that I had on LLC, I did change to a Delaware C Corp. I think there are certain investor rights. This is coming in through the Q&A, Lauren. There's certain investor rights awarded to Delaware C Corp structures, like information rights for investors, et cetera. And so it is much easier to fundraise as a Delaware C Corp than an LLC or any C Corp, founded in another state. So that's sort of how I would recommend. And someone said, can you recommend the legal structure? Just make sure they have the practice of M&A and securities, because when you're issuing stock, issuing notes, you're under securities law, and you want someone who knows and can advise you on what to say and what not to say. And the best of the best will actually make intros to angel groups and investors for you. And so I highly recommend getting that legal counsel. It's one of the things that makes a huge difference early on. I had to change legal counsel eventually, so don't hesitate to change either. I think there's an opportunity for maybe Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center to have an M&A and securities attorney on, because I don't want to get too deep into, is Delaware better than Wyoming? Those types of things. I have my personal opinions.
100% agree.
I will not go there, but I will go just briefly. There's been a couple questions around how does this relate to nonprofit? There's no cap table. There's no dilution concept. I would say that's another concept, fundraising in a nonprofit space. Now that I'm a nonprofit, I can actually speak to that. But today we're going to keep focused on for-profit and note management. But there is a lot of interesting intersections happening, and that gets to the maybe next slide where we talk about alternative financing. So everything up until now has been focused on kind of the traditional raise, the traditional cap table management, entity structure of startups. If we go to the next slide, Lauren, we want to also make sure you understand that it's not always raising money from an angel investor or VC in the traditional way. There's some emerging things out there that I would recommend exploring. So, and especially now in today's market, venture capital is a little finicky, a little prickly because of what's happening in AI. Where do we make returns? What do those time horizons look like? And so we're seeing the emergence of a few next gen crowdfunding platforms. I think there was a first gen of crowdfunding, kind of Kickstarter concepts, et cetera. Now we've shifted that under the Jobs Act that allows for a special purpose vehicle to go on your cap table, which would combine all of the crowdfunders who contribute to your actual fundraise, not like buying a product. A few that I'd call out are Seat at the Table, awesome group that is helping underrepresented founders gain access to fundraising through crowdfunding. Sweater Ventures, we've had a few of our companies go through that. Start Engine. And I think this is the best fit for companies that have an engaged user base, customer base, that are understand the market that you're addressing, want to make that investment. I've heard you can go down to $250, $250, $500. So some of our founders have used it to fill their round, or to show investors that, look, I have a very engaged customer user base. So don't rule that out, or take a look at the next gen crowdfunding platforms. Another, I think, to keep a pulse on are grant programs. SBIRs are getting a revamp at the federal level. Historically, these were not a normal funding route for early stage companies, small business grants, but that whole process is getting revamped to deploy more capital in smaller amounts to early stage businesses that come with coaching, et cetera. So just want to put that on your radar. The last one mentioned, I think, is SBIR. State innovation funds are starting. So take a look, connect with your local technology council, and try to understand what the state and local priorities are for innovation funding. Also, grants. A lot of our companies are applying for state and federal grants to get their initial seed capital, if you will, to build product, to perform a service that also gives them funding to build a product. And so these historically haven't been kind of the narrative, but definitely take a look at what's out there. There's some great search engines that help now with deep research and ChatGPT. Don't hesitate to look into that. And the last one that is also in its next version is revenue-based financing. There used to be revenue-based financing for SaaS-only companies that if you're selling a SaaS contract, you can borrow essentially working capital against those customer contracts without giving up equity or board control. And so that's for companies that have revenue already, can grow the working capital component. And working capital is something that I think I would recommend everyone take a look at and try to get the definitions of. You can actually use a revenue-based financing solution to bring AI into your product, for example. Sometimes venture capital isn't the best capital source for the use that you're looking at. And so make sure that your capital source matches your use of funds, um, whether that's uh, revenue-based financing or lending, working capital, or dilutive investment capital, risk-based capital. All those kind of have a special purpose that you want to match up to be most efficient. Lauren, anything you want to add in terms of alternative capital strategies that you see out there?
No, I'm just glad that we're talking about them, Anna, because I think there's often this mindset that venture is the only path, which could not be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm. Um, I'm just going to clear out a few questions here. Someone said I was under the impression that SBIR was being stopped. Who knows? It changes on a daily basis, but my latest conversation was there's some proposals to have it be revamped and change how it's working. But don't quote me on that. Doesn't crowdfunding mess up the cap table? So just to iterate, the special purpose vehicle, so a tiny LLC, one line item would be on your cap table using these types of platforms. So it doesn't give you 400 people on your cap table. It gives you one line item. And I think that's one of the major innovations. Um, in terms of what happens if, like in my case, where we had customers that wasn't built, I think in your case too, Lauren, like you're getting customers on board, but your product isn't built. How do you do that? One quote unquote hack that I have is an early adopter program that is structured over a 10-month period, let's say. And so you're selling this program where the very first few months you're doing discovery, you're interviewing, you're producing a survey result, you're providing a service, and those first few months give you enough time to get a MVP out the door, and but also give you insights on the service side to back up what you're building. And so there's some ways you can structure what that package of an early adopter program looks like so that it's not we're going to deploy a product day one. It's we're coming in to discover, give you insights. What are the pain points that you have? We're going to help solve them and deliver a product during the early adopter program. Um, I'm just looking at another one here. Um, have you found it harder for businesses 5 years or older to fundraise, get investors, or crowdfund? It's interesting. Lauren, do you have thoughts on if you've been around a while, is there kind of like a house on the market? If it hasn't fundraised in 5 years, is something wrong? What have you seen there?
There, in venture, there absolutely is. So that's just something to be really cautious about is investors do look at sort of like what amount of traction you've gotten in an increment of time, right? And if the observation is you have been working on this for a long time with minimal traction, then that's an immediate red flag. And so I think it, like Anna said, it doesn't mean that you cannot fundraise from venture, but you have to be really cognizant about how that's balanced relative to that scorecard we talked about earlier.
Awesome. Um, I agree. I think you could play it a little bit in that we have been de-risking the company and the go-to-market to ensure that we have true product market fit. And if you are really data oriented in that discussion, we initially had a hypothesis our customer acquisition cost was $5, but over the last 5 years, we've gotten it down to $2. I would say most investors would think that's a pretty compelling thing that you've done, and that you're looking for funding just to pour gas on what you've learned over the last 5 years. So a lot of this has to do with how you measure and test what you are building and de-risking if you are indeed seeking fundraising.
I think that piece around the story, Anna, is really key because ultimately, like, what's the reason that 5 years has passed and you haven't raised or you haven't reached X milestones, right? There needs to be a story around it as to why now, right? And then I just want to add one more thing to the piece around selling before having a product, because I think this is just something that is so non-intuitive, right? It's like, wait, how could I sell something before I even have something to sell? It just seems like it should be flipped around, right? But when in the earliest stages, the reason that sort of non-intuitive piece of selling ahead of building your product makes a lot of sense is because you're so early in validating whether you want to whether this is a market, right, that has demand for what you're aiming to build, that you don't want to spend money building something before you validated that demand. And in fact, investors view that as a really positive thing.
Right.
That there's market pull that's so strong that people are buying this, signing contracts or LOIs, letters of intent, even before you've built something. And I would say these days, it's especially efficient to do that because of just how amazing the AI prototyping tools are these days, right? Like back in the day, my day, 5 years ago, ages ago, right? We used Figma, oh my gosh, to, hand build these demo mocks, right? Nowadays, you can just use Replit, Lovable, Bolt, any of these tools to prototype something and have something you can demo to a potential customer pretty quickly.
Hey, folks,
Um,
I don't want to interrupt, but we have 2 minutes left. I am
yeah.
perfectly happy letting you all keep on going. And if anyone wants to stay on, they can. Or if we want to, I mean, we have so many questions we haven't addressed. It is completely up to you, but let me know what you guys would like to
Um,
do. And I'm happy to go on. If not,
Unfortunately, I have to run, but I think
sure.
if we go to the last slide, this is a fantastic summary. And I think what we've realized is, we got your juices flowing, right? And that's the most important thing is just like, aha, these little tidbits. I need to take note, go dig into that a little bit more. So let's go to the next slide. And then I invite all of you, connect with us on LinkedIn. You have our information. We do office hours. Oops, Lauren, is that slide going ahead for you?
Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
You advance the slide one more.
Yes, let me do that.
Oh, thank you. So just think about tranching your rounds, think about co-founder equity and investing, choose the right instrument. Remember your cap table today determines your flexibility tomorrow, and all of these decisions compound over time. And so I think what we want to help you uh, realize today is, wow, there's definitely a path here. This is not just keep going and talking to investors and pitching a deck. There is a structured approach, and we're cheering you on and wishing you all the success. And really, thank you so much, Brooke, and the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center for having us today.
Amazing. I'm so thankful to have you all, you both here. We will be putting up a quick survey at the very end in a poll that will be shared. But I just want to mention we will be sharing these slides and the replay of this class by email. So keep an eye out for an email from hello@nasdaqcenter.org. Our new email, if you haven't added it to your safe senders list, please do so. And I'm also going to take all of the questions that weren't answered in the Q&A and do our best to get some answers for those as well. I'll work with our team. If you haven't already, we have a Capital Pathways workbook that is available free for download on our website. I welcome you to also download it because it covers a lot of this information as well. Thank you both so much. If there's anything you want to leave us with, please do. If not, we will move on to the survey.
I'm just glad that you're getting all these great questions and if we can help answer them. But just want to encourage all of you to be deliberate, be thoughtful, and all of the best along your journey.
Oh, just one quick question. Been asked a few times. It's asking what the third option was with it was sweater.
Oh,
Um,
if you go up, it's in the slide as well.
okay.
There we go. So we have Seat at the Table, Sweater Ventures, and Start Engine. These are just some
Great.
of the crowdfunding platforms we've seen.
Thank you. And everyone,
Absolutely.
keep an eye out for your email.
All right, great to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.